as much as I loved him and admired his extraordinary musical talent, I could not do the bitterness.
Just before his final breath, Robbie Robertson shared something he had been carrying for years: the truth about Levon Helm. Hidden behind the fame was a fractured brotherhood that led to the band's downfall. This wasn't about settling scores, it was about setting the record straight. The bond, the break, and the brutal honesty, it's nothing like we ever imagined. Join us as we find out what happened to the friendship between the two bandmates. Once were brothers. The story of Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm moves like an old rock song. Smooth in some parts, rough in others, full of energy and packed with emotion. It began long before they became famous, back in the late 1950s and early 1960s. These two musicians came from very different worlds. Robertson was a young guitarist and songwriter from Canada. Helm was a drummer and singer from Arkansas. Their paths eventually crossed, and together with other members, they formed a group that would change the sound of rock and Americana music forever. Levon Helm's journey into music began while he was still in high school. He had a deep love for rhythm and blues and grew up in a musical household. When Ronnie Hawkins, a well-known rockabilly artist, noticed him, he invited Helm to join his band, the Hawks. Helm's mother insisted that he finish school first, so he played locally only on weekends. After graduating in 1958, he joined the Hawks full-time and moved with them to Toronto, Canada. There, they signed a deal with Roulette Records and started releasing singles, a few of which became local hits. Helm quickly became an essential part of the group. His powerful voice and steady drumming set a solid foundation for the band. Around this time, he also picked up the name Levon. His bandmates had trouble pronouncing his real name, Levon, and started calling him Levon because it was easier. The name stuck, and so did his place in the band. By the early 1960s, Hawkins began rebuilding the Hawks with fresh talent. He hired Canadian musicians like Robertson on guitar, Danko on bass, Manuel on piano, and Hudson on organ. All of them were young, highly skilled, and eager to prove themselves. Another member, Stan Celeste, was also briefly part of the group during this time. Hawkins had a sharp eye for talent and often recruited the best players from rival bands in the Toronto and Hamilton area. That's how most of the future band members ended up under his wing. With Ronnie Hawkins leading the way, the group became the tightest, most professional rock act in Toronto's growing music scene. Hawkins was strict, demanding endless rehearsals, sometimes all night after long club gigs. But it paid off. The young musicians developed faster than they would have anywhere else. Their playing became sharper, their timing better, and their bond deeper. But eventually, they began to feel limited by Hawkins's style and leadership. They wanted more freedom. They had ideas of their own and wanted to create their own sound. In 1963, the group made a bold move. They left Ronnie Hawkins to strike out on their own. They had been trained so well that they felt ready to take control of their future. Though it was a risky decision, it also opened the door to a new chapter. They performed under several names during this time. For a short while, they called themselves the Levon Helm Sextet, adding a saxophone player named Jerry Penfound. When Penfound left, they changed their name again, this time to Levon and the Hawks. In 1965, they released a single as the Canadian Squires, but soon returned to the name Levon and the Hawks for later recordings. That same year, they met Sonny Boy Williamson, a legendary blues singer and harmonica player. They hoped to work with him and even offered to be his backing band. Sadly, Williamson passed away not long after they met him. Still, the encounter showed the band's growing interest in blues and deep American roots music. They were learning, adapting, and shaping their identity. Not long after that, another major opportunity came their way. Bob Dylan had begun moving away from acoustic folk and was experimenting with electric instruments. He needed a new band to support him on tour. After hearing the group and speaking with Robertson, Dylan invited both Robertson and Helm to join him. They played 2 shows as Dylan's backing musicians. But instead of continuing without the others, Helm and Robertson insisted that Dylan hire the whole band. Their loyalty was strong, and they knew their strength came from their unity. Dylan agreed, and soon Levon and the Hawks were on tour with one of the most famous musicians in the world. At that point, they didn't fully understand just how big Dylan was. They had thought of themselves as a rock and rhythm and blues group, while Dylan had been known mostly for his folk songs and protest anthems. Still, the partnership worked, and it brought the group more attention than ever before. It was during those early days that the bond between Robertson and Helm became strong, built on shared experience and long hours of performing. They both came from different places, had different temperaments, but they believed in the music and each other. They were just 2 musicians chasing a dream. Together with the others, they laid the foundation for what would soon become known as the band, a group that would leave an unforgettable mark on music history. The sound they created was something new, yet deeply rooted in old traditions. And it all started with hard work, loyalty, and a belief in something bigger than themselves. The band. When Bob Dylan teamed up with the Hawks for a series of concerts between September 1965 and May 1966, something explosive began to unfold. These shows were promoted as Bob Dylan and the Band, and they marked a shift in Dylan's style. He was moving away from pure folk music and stepping into the louder, electrified world of rock. But that shift came with a heavy price. Dylan, during this time, was said to be using large amounts of substance. His behavior reflected that change, and while some of the Hawks joined him in that lifestyle, others found it hard to follow. The concerts became a battleground between old and new. Many folk music fans weren't ready to accept Dylan's new sound. They mocked and booed. Some even shouted angrily during performances. For Levon Helm, the drummer of the Hawks, it became too much to take. After just over a month on the road, he decided he'd had enough and walked away from the tour. The tension and backlash had affected him, and instead of sticking around, he chose a quieter life, working on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico for a while. But the story didn't end there. In 1968, the group re-emerged with a powerful new identity. They were no longer just Dylan's backing band, they were the band. Their first album, titled Music from Big Pink, was more than a collection of songs. It felt like a journey through America's past, told with heart, soul, and raw honesty. Their music was rooted in old traditions, blending rock, folk, blues, and gospel. The songs painted vivid pictures and carried deep emotions. Tracks like The Weight, I Shall Be Released, and Chest Fever stood out immediately. The Weight, especially, became a defining song. It told a story full of strange and colorful characters wrapped in a sound that felt completely different from everything else at the time. The band wasn't chasing trends. They were creating something timeless. Robbie Robertson was the main songwriter, and Levon Helm gave the songs their strength with his bold drumming and unforgettable voice. The group felt united, each member adding something vital to the music. They followed up with Stage Fright in 1970. This album felt more intense and personal. The songs revealed their inner struggles. The Shape I'm In and Stage Fright carried a raw energy that made the pain and tension in the band's life very clear. There was a vulnerability in the music that fans could feel. Robertson's lyrics dug deep, and Helm's voice brought them to life in a way that felt real and close. By the early 1970s, things began to shift. The group's next album, Cahoots, came out in 1971. Expectations were high, but the album didn't meet them. Critics weren't impressed, and the reaction was lukewarm. Still, the album had its bright spots. Bob Dylan dropped by while they were working on it, and together they recorded "When I Paint My Masterpiece," which became a standout moment. Another strong track was "Life is a Carnival," which featured vibrant horn arrangements by Alan Toussaint. The energy in that song made it one of their favorites to play live, and it stayed in their set lists until the very end. Even though Cahoots didn't make a big splash, the band kept moving. They toured through 1970 and 1971, giving powerful live performances. These shows were captured on Rock of Ages, a double album released in 1972. It was recorded during a run of concerts at the Academy of Music in New York, right at the end of the previous year. Those shows had a magic of their own, filled with passion and sharp musicianship. After that run, the group decided to take a break from touring, but they didn't stay quiet for long. They made a huge return in July 1973 when they played at the Summer Jam at Watkins Glen. They shared the stage with the Allman Brothers Band and the Grateful Dead. Over 600,000 people came, setting a new record for a pop festival. The band had found their way back into the spotlight. Later that year, they released Moondog Matinee, an album of cover songs. It was a tribute to the music they loved growing up rock and roll from the 50s and 60s. These were songs that had shaped them, and their performances brought a fresh energy to the old classics. Everything eventually led to The Last Waltz in 1976, which was released as a film in 1978. It was their final concert together as a group, and it was more than just a farewell. It was a grand celebration. Martin Scorsese directed the film, and he gave the event a cinematic brilliance. The concert was filled with famous guests: Eric Clapton, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, and many more. On the surface, it looked like a perfect goodbye. The music was strong, the crowd was alive, and the stage sparkled. But behind that memorable concert, there were cracks. The band's unity had been wearing thin for years. The long tours, the personal issues, the lifestyle, they had all taken their toll. Still, for one final night, they came together and gave the world something unforgettable. Their music, their story, and their legacy would live on far beyond that stage, but not without its share of difficulties. The conflict between Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm. While the band rose quickly to fame, creating music that touched millions and shaping a sound that would be remembered for generations, the success brought pressure. And as the years passed, it became harder for the members to stay united. Fame, creative disagreements, and personal troubles began pulling them apart, little by little. Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm had once been incredibly close. Their bond had the strength of family. They spent years creating music together, sharing stages, long road trips, and the highs and lows of life on tour. But eventually, things started to change. The first sign of trouble came when the band decided to stop touring. Robertson, who had been the main songwriter, was eager to explore new creative directions. He wanted to take the music to different places, push boundaries, and evolve. Helm didn't feel the same way. He had always felt a deep connection to the roots of their sound. He loved the traditional influences that had shaped their early music and didn't want to move too far from that. As Robertson began leaning into new styles and ideas, Helm felt increasingly left out. The connection they once shared began to fade. Their views no longer aligned, and slowly they started to drift apart. Things came to a head when Robertson left the band in 1976 after their legendary farewell concert. His departure shocked Helm. To Helm, it seemed like Robertson had walked away, leaving the rest of them behind to deal with the pressure and problems that fame had brought. That feeling of abandonment stayed with Helm and grew heavier as he faced a string of financial issues and personal challenges in the years that followed. In 1993, Helm published his memoir, This Wheel's on Fire. In it, he did not hold back. He wrote openly about his disappointments and frustrations, focusing a lot on Robertson. He questioned Robertson's decisions, especially the way he handled the band's finances and creative control. He believed that Robertson had taken a bigger share of the earnings from their songs than was fair. Helm felt the rest of the group had been pushed aside, while Robertson benefited the most. That book reopened wounds that had never really healed. It sparked a public feud between the two former bandmates. Robertson was deeply hurt by the things Helm had written. He believed their shared past had been twisted and misrepresented. From Robertson's point of view, their bond had meant something deeper. The criticism felt personal and painful, especially since they had once trusted each other like family. It felt like an act of betrayal. Helm's resentment seemed to come not only from financial matters, but also from how he perceived he had been treated. He felt that Robertson had distanced himself from the band, choosing his own path without regard for the others. The book painted a picture of promises broken and friendships lost. Years later, Robertson spoke about his relationship with Helm. His words were filled with both warmth and sorrow. He remembered how close they had once been. For him, Helm had not just been a bandmate, but someone he considered a brother. Their friendship had been at the heart of their success. The emotional connection between them had shaped the music they created. Robertson reflected on how deeply that bond had influenced their work. He spoke of the documentary Once Were Brothers, which focused on that very friendship. He acknowledged that their closeness had made the music what it was. Their songs had come from a place of shared passion and understanding. But after the band ended, everything changed. Helm faced serious health problems and money troubles. That pain turned into anger, and much of it was directed at Robertson. Robertson admitted that Helm's bitterness was hard to understand at first. They had never argued during their years together. Not once. So when Helm's feelings turned cold and distant, it was like losing someone twice. Once as a friend, and again through their falling out. He was taken aback by how far things had gone, but he also tried to see it from Helm's side. Robertson explained that if he had been in Helm's situation, facing the same hardships, he might have felt the same way. Still, even with all that had happened, Robertson chose to focus on the good. He held on to the memories of what they had accomplished together. The tours, the songs, the crowds, those were the moments he valued most. He believed that the music they created deserved to be remembered without bitterness. He didn't want the anger or the blame to erase the beauty of what they had built. He admitted feeling deep sadness over Helm's struggles. There was regret too, not because of specific actions, but because he couldn't do anything to make things right. The damage was done, and some things couldn't be fixed. Still, Robertson hoped their shared history would be remembered not just for the conflict, but for the brilliance of their time together. He saw their journey as something rare and powerful, even if it didn't end the way he had hoped. The final parting. After being apart for 5 long years, Rick Danko, Levon Helm, Garth Hudson, and Richard Manuel came back together in 1983 for a special tour. They performed without Robbie Robertson, who had chosen a different path and was now fully focused on writing and producing music for films. Even though Robertson had stepped away, the others continued to keep the spirit of their group alive. Sadly, just 3 years after the reunion, Richard Manuel passed away in 1986. Manuel's demise left a heavy shadow over the group, but the remaining 3 stayed committed. They kept touring regularly and released new music from time to time. Their dedication lasted all the way until 1999, when Rick Danko suddenly passed away. After losing him, the group could not carry on. They quietly disbanded for good. Levon Helm, however, did not stop. He carefully rebuilt his solo career and eventually found great success. His music in the folk and Americana styles reached many people, and he earned several Grammy Awards for his later work. Helm's voice and drumming continued to inspire fans, and his career remained active for many years. But by 2012, his health started to decline. During the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremonies in Cleveland that April, Robbie Robertson spoke kindly of Helm, sending prayers and well wishes. This sudden message caught attention and made people wonder about Helm's condition. In the months before, Helm had been canceling shows, explaining that he had health problems or back pain. His final performances took place in New York. On March 24th, he played at the Tarrytown Music Hall. A week later, on March 31st, he held one last midnight ramble at his studio in Woodstock, where the band Los Lobos opened the evening. These shows, performed quietly and humbly, turned out to be his last. On April 17th, Helm's wife Sandy and daughter Amy made a heartbreaking announcement. They shared that Levon was now facing end-stage throat cancer. The news came quickly and shook his fans deeply. The next day, Robbie Robertson posted about a long, emotional visit he had shared with Helm just a few days earlier at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Around the same time, Garth Hudson shared his own sadness on his personal website. He didn't write much, simply saying he was too heartbroken to speak. Instead, he left a video of himself and the Alexis P. Suter Band performing Bob Dylan's Knocking on Heaven's Door, which said everything without needing words. On April 19, 2012, Levon Helm passed away due to complications from throat cancer. He was 71 years old. A public wake was held on April 26 at Helm's Barn Studio in Woodstock, and nearly 2,000 fans showed up to say goodbye. The next day, after a private funeral, a solemn procession moved through the streets of Woodstock. Helm was buried in the town cemetery, not far from the grave of his old friend Rick Danko. Even former President Bill Clinton released a statement to honor him, showing how deeply Helm's life had touched people across generations. The band's legacy is continued by the Weight Band, created in 2012 at Levon Helm's barn. Formed by Jim Wider and Randy Chiarlante, both former band members, they played classic songs alongside Garth Hudson, Jimmy Vivino, and Byron Isaacs. Their performances captured the spirit of the band while introducing fresh material. In July 2017, PBS's Infinity Hall Live showcased the Weight Band in a televised concert, blending beloved covers with original music. Robbie Robertson's personal life. Robbie Robertson's life was shaped by family secrets, deep emotional experiences, and a powerful love for music and storytelling. His early years were not easy. As a child, he lived through moments that would stay with him forever. At home, things were not always peaceful. His father, Jim Robertson, was distant and often unkind. Robbie never felt close to him, and the coldness in their relationship left a mark on his heart. But even in those early years, Robbie had a deep curiosity about who he was and where he came from. That curiosity turned into shock when his mother sat him down one day and told him something that would change his life forever. Jim Robertson was not his real father. This was not something Robbie had ever suspected. His entire understanding of his past suddenly shifted. The truth was that his biological father was a man named Alexander Kligerman. He had been involved in a rough world, known as a Jewish gangster. Kligerman's life was cut short before Robbie was even born. Robbie had never met him, never heard about him, and never imagined such a person had shaped his bloodline. Soon after the big revelation, Robbie's mother introduced him to members of his real father's family. Their names were Nathan and Morris Kligerman. These people, who had once been strangers, opened their arms to him and treated him with care and love. They didn't just welcome him into their home, they welcomed him into a whole new world. It was through them that Robbie began to understand a side of himself that had always been hidden. The Kligermans helped him see his heritage more clearly. They saw something special in him. and that support helped to build his confidence and passion. The way they treated him gave Robbie a sense of identity that he had never fully felt before. Even though he had lost his real father, these relatives made sure he didn't lose the connection to his roots. They shared stories, showed him traditions, and gave him their full attention when he spoke about music. Even if they didn't completely understand his musical dreams at first, they supported him without hesitation. That meant everything to Robbie. It gave him strength to follow his path. Robertson's mother came from the Six Nations Reserve, and through her, Robbie was introduced to a powerful tradition of music and storytelling. The elders in his family had a way of telling stories that stirred emotions deep inside him. Their words had rhythm, their voices carried feeling, and their tales felt larger than life. As a boy, Robbie listened closely, soaking in every detail. He wanted to tell stories like that one day. He wanted to make people feel what he felt when those elders spoke. That love for storytelling stayed with him and shaped the music he would later create. For Robbie, music wasn't just about melody or rhythm. It was about telling a story, sharing a journey, expressing something that words alone couldn't say. His songs were full of emotion, memory, and meaning. He didn't just play music. He painted scenes, built characters, and brought feelings to life. Later in his life, Robertson worked on a new album that felt completely different from anything he had done before. He was filled with excitement about the direction it was taking. The way they played with the instruments, the way they shaped the sound. It all felt fresh and free. There were no limits. They took creative risks, and that freedom made it feel like a new beginning. It wasn't just another album. It was an experience. Robertson poured his energy into the project, driven by a love for growth and discovery. One moment that stood out during this time was a photo shoot with Richard Avatar. During the session, Avatar set off a flash that left everyone temporarily blinded. Instead of stopping, Avatar decided to turn the accident into something memorable. He told everyone to close their eyes and captured the moment as it was. That one unexpected flash turned into a fun and unforgettable photograph. It was just one of many light-hearted memories from a life that was often very serious and emotional. Robbie's personal life also had its share of progress and turning points. On March 24, 1968, he married Dominique Bourgeois, a Canadian journalist. They built a family together and had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son named Sebastian. But over time, the relationship changed, and in November 2003, the couple decided to end their marriage. Even after their separation, Dominique remained an important part of Robbie's life. Years later, Robertson found love again. On March 12, 2023, he married Janet Zuccarini, a Canadian entrepreneur and restaurateur known for her appearances on Top Chef Canada. The two had been together for 4 years before deciding to get married. Janet shared the news on her Instagram, and for Robbie, it marked the beginning of another meaningful chapter. Throughout his life, Robertson was not only known for his music, but also for his deep care for others. He supported various causes and was an active member of Artists Against Racism, showing his dedication to fighting injustice through action. He wanted to use his platform for something bigger than himself. Sadly, on August 9, 2023, Robbie Robertson passed away in Los Angeles after fighting prostate cancer for a year. He was 80 years old. At the time of his passing, he was surrounded by loved ones, including both Janet and Dominique. His passing left a hole in the world of music and in the hearts of many who admired him. To honor his life and legacy, director Martin Scorsese organized a tribute concert in Los Angeles in November 2023. The event brought together names like Joni Mitchell, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Lily Gladstone to celebrate the man who had touched so many lives through his music and his story. The following year, in October 2024, another celebration took place. This time, a tribute concert organized with the help of Martin Scorsese. Held at the Kia Forum, the event brought together legendary musicians such as Bob Weir, Eric Clapton, and Mavis Staples. Their participation paid heartfelt tribute to the enduring influence and timeless music of the band, underlining the group's lasting impact on rock and Americana music. Robbie Robertson's life was filled with challenges, discoveries, and growth. He took every twist in his journey and turned it into something meaningful. His music carried pieces of his life, his roots, and his dreams. Even after his passing, Robbie's spirit lives on in every song he left behind. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.